that it was a danger in all areas and that you yourself were targeted. And then now you've mentioned Abuboga and several killings. Can you provide the court with some examples of the killings that may have occurred in that neighborhood or thereabouts, the killings that you may remember? Answer. Thank you. A. Kute, Koute. That's a sub-neighborhood of Abuboga, which was attacked by the Commando Invisible, and which resulted in several injuries and deaths. The inhabitants who were able to succeeded to flee from that zone, and the survivors who were found were then brought to various churches and temples in Abidjan. Second specific case, PK-18. Once again, the Commando Invisible struck at civilian populations in that neighborhood. That's all, counsel. 2 specific cases. Question. Very well. What did the inhabitants do in the face of those attacks? Answer. These were people who were at a total loss, whose only salvation was to flee those zones, those areas, to more safe areas such as Kokodi. Question. Very well. So it was your testimony that in the face of those killings, and I'm referring to the excerpt I just mentioned too, it was necessary to take military and administrative measures to address that. And you said, and I quote, mindful of the security situation prevailing at the time in Abuboga commune, there was need for a curfew in that area, but the curfew was never implemented. End of quote.
Première question.
First question. You explained the killings of the Commando Invisible and gave us 2 examples, and you said there was need for administrative measures, and one of them is a curfew. My question is the following. Is a curfew an appropriate measure in the face of these types of killings and disorder? Answer. Maybe there was a mistake in the language. What was intended was that Abuboga, in the face of those killings, should be declared a war zone, but that measure was never implemented.
D'accord.
And question. Very well. So, it was never implemented. Can you tell us a little more? Why was it not implemented? Answer. The idea was discussed at a meeting at the presidency chaired by the President of the Republic, Mr. Laurent Gbagbo. Opinions differed between participants as to whether Abuboga should be declared a war zone. And so the idea was that it wouldn't prosper if that were to be done in a large city like Abidjan. So that is why the idea didn't prosper. Question. Very well.
Alors, à propos d'Abobo, est-ce que...
Question. As far as you know, and in relation to Abobo. After a certain date, there was no post or position of the security forces in Abobo. Is that the case? Or did the forces of security remain positioned in Abobo throughout the crisis? Answer. The forces of security were stationed within the Aboboga barracks, squadron rather, and at Maka in order to stop the advance of the Commando Invisible towards Abidjan Center. Question, very well. Now, the Commando Invisible and other groups, other armed groups during the crisis, as superior commander of the gendarmerie, were you informed at any time, and maybe before the beginning of the crisis, before the presidential elections, just before or even during or just after the presidential elections, were you informed of Abidjan having been infiltrated by organized groups which were expected to launch an attack at some point? Answer. I was not aware of it, but with the presence of the Commando Invisible, it could have been supposed that there had been prior infiltrators who organized themselves into the Commando Invisible to be able to launch the attacks. Question. Were you informed just before the elections, during the elections, and just after the elections, or at any time whatsoever, of the existence of weapons caches? Answer. Weapons caches? No, I was not aware of that. Everything was happening peacefully with a view to providing security for the electoral process. However, did this not preclude others who may have had other intentions from setting up weapons caches? Question. Now I want to show you a document to begin with. Reference CIV OTP 00430410 of 5 May 2010.
Alors, vous voyez le document, monsieur?
Do you see the document, sir? Well, maybe we can, yes. Can you see it? Answer yes. Question. Do you, one moment, please.
Alors, monsieur, est-ce que ce document vous a été...
Sir, was this document addressed to you? Answer, yes. The superior command was the addressee of the document. Question. The subject is discovery and seizure of weapons of war and military attire. Date 5 May 2010. Now, very quickly, I want to summarize the document and hear your comments if you wish to make any comments. This document deals with weapons of war having been seized, including, among others, on the 5th of May 2010 at the Quartier Rond, not far from the Station Afrique in Anyama, where the second place of seizure was at the residence of Fofana Banya, Marabu, and Kalashnikovs and various weapons and pistols, anti-tank rockets, and so on and so forth, all types of ammunitions, 4 cartons of various camouflage attires belonging to the gendarmerie and to the police. Can we scroll up? I'm sorry, I was reading and summarizing, but I would like the registry to please scroll up so that we can see what items we're dealing with. You're very right, learned colleague. Thank you.
Tranquillement cette
Now, please read through the first page and then we can move to the second page. The witness, yes, done. Question, can we go to the second page, please?
Alors,
Have you read the second page now, sir? Answer, it's not on the screen. We can't see the document, says the witness. Question. No, I could give you a hard copy if that's better, Mr. Witness. Please, court usher, can you help?
oui. Bon, parfait.
The witness, yes. Question. Perfect. Do you remember this specific incident relating to the discovery of a weapons cache? Answer, no, I don't remember it at all. And the name Ahundong, which is next to the stamp, does not ring a bell at all when it comes to my men or my troops at the time. Question, very well. Do you remember any other incidents or any other times when arms caches were discovered? Answer, no, I no longer have any recollection, not at all.
Alors, je vais vous montrer.
Question, I will now show you another document. CIV OTP 0044 0061.
At the level of confidentiality.
Confidentiel.
Confidential.
Alors, vous l'avez sous les yeux, monsieur?
Can you see the document now, sir? Answer yes. Question. This document is dated 22 November 2010 and is addressed to you. Do you remember the document? Answer yes. Please, let's proceed. Question. Do you remember the document? No. No, I don't remember the document, but maybe I can read through it and that might jog my memory. Question. Do you want us to read the document together? Please, let's do. Now, the document is addressed to you. The subject, proposal to offer a written message of congratulation to the intervention unit of the National Gendarmerie. I will summarize the content quickly, and I think this can be appropriate. It states that there was an operation aiming to discover weapons caches in Abidjan and surrounding neighborhoods, particularly in Anyama, during which gendarmes, and I quote, were able to discover, and I quote, a genuine war arsenal made up of the following: 5 RLPG, 1 A152, 1 P56, 1 SIG, 5 SIG rather, 2 AK-47, 3 PM March 49, 2 12 caliber guns, locally fabricated, and 414 camouflage uniforms. End of quote.
Nous bien car nous sommes des BOC.
Now, please help us to understand. You are the professional. We know nothing much about this. What is question? Anti-tank weapons? Answer yes. Registry, would you please kindly scroll up as I read through the document? Please scroll down to the bottom of the document as I read.
Un peu.
Further down, please.
Très bien. Encore un tout petit peu qu'on voit la fin.
Further down again, please. Just a little further down so that we can see the end of the document. March14th. Thank you. Let's hold it there because I'm putting questions to the witness on the weapons that are listed as having been discovered. Now, there's a T56. What is a T56? T56 is a handgun.
C'est quoi des SIG?
5 SIG. What is an SIG? Those are weapons that look like the Kalashnikov. 2 AK-47. What is an AK-47? Answer, it's the Kalash. 3 PMMAT-49. What is that? These are machine guns. Very well. And then reference is made to 414 camouflage uniforms. Now, first question, sir, do you remember this specific incident? Or let me rephrase. Do you remember the discovery of this specific weapons cache? Answer, no, I have no recollection whatsoever. If that had been the case, our Army's communication services would have issued a communique as in previous cases. Question, very well. Now, to make everything clear, I want to ask the registry to move us to the second page so that we can read it, you can read it, and as you read through it, the content of the proposal in the document, then you might maybe remember whether you are aware of this. Please read the document silently to yourself.
Oui.
The witness, I'm done. Question: does that jog your memory? Do you remember this specific discovery of a weapons cache? Or is your opinion the same? I don't remember, because if that had been the case, the suspect would have been prosecuted.
Mr. President.
Mr. Prosecutor?
Your Honor, could we just have a clarification as to when this operation would have taken place? Because there's a couple of dates on this document, and it's not perfectly clear right now as to which time period we are talking about.
Maître Altit?
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Maître Altit, thank you, Mr. President. I'm not sure I've understood the comment from my colleague opposite. I have read out a document to my colleague, and we are both aware of what is in the document, but the witness does not remember the operation, so I don't think that we can get any more information out of him.
Your Honor, the document, which is dated 22nd November, makes reference to 11th of June, a request of the 11th of June. So that's the clarification.
Yes, but of course, but if the document is submitted, so we will draw the conclusion out of that. But if the witness doesn't recall anything, it's useless to ask him about it, I would say.
Well, just as long as it's on the record that it's in reference to an 11th of June request, yes.
Maître Altit?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Altit, thank you, Mr. President. Let us go back to before the crisis of 2010, several months before that, but not very long. As Supreme Commander of the Gendarmerie, what did you know about any possible recruitment of Burkina mercenaries? Did you ever hear about any possible recruitment of mercenaries from Burkina in the months preceding the election of 2010? Answer: no. Question: very well. Did you hear, and now I mean later, during the crisis period, that mercenaries had been recruited in Burkina and gathered in the north of Côte d'Ivoire, and they were waiting for the time to go down to the south of Côte d'Ivoire? Did you hear any such information? Answer: no, I did not have the information. I did not have any people who could inform me from Burkina, so I didn't have such information. Question: very well. I will rephrase, because I asked you two different questions and maybe I was not quite clear. My first question dealt with the recruitment of mercenaries in Burkina during a peace period, a few months before the presidential election. My second question was to know whether in 2010, after the crisis started, that is November, December 2010, or January, February, March, April 2011, did you hear during the crisis that mercenaries recruited in Burkina Faso were assembled in the north of Côte d'Ivoire and were waiting to come south? This is in the middle of the crisis. Did you have any such information? Answer, no, I didn't have any such information. Question, very well.
Avez-vous eu à un moment quelconque
Question, did you at any time at all receive information that French special services were organizing troops to go down to the south of Côte d'Ivoire and set up or rather install the president that the Electoral Commission said had been elected, Alassane Ouattara? Answer, no, I did not receive that information. Question, very well.
It's not about
Question,
it's not about the questions themselves, but about the basis. What is the foundation for these questions?
Yes, but
Where are they coming from?
it's a question.
Of course, but it has to be a foundation, a good faith basis,
Why?
not a fishing expedition as to
No,
where
but-
does this.
But why? I mean, it's a question. This is the head of the gendarmerie of Côte d'Ivoire. I think that any question which is somehow in his possibility of knowledge is acceptable.
But
I
The information has to be based on accurate information. We don't know where this is coming from. There has to be accurate information on which it is based on. So the question is, what is the foundation?
Well, I think that the foundation is the person he has in front, is the witness himself, and what he was at the time of the crisis. So if he knows something about whatever, I don't see that this is a question which should not be put to this person.
I really
Thank you. Metaltit?
Mr. Altit, sir, you talked about the Gulf Hotel as the boss of the gendarmerie. What did you know about the number of ex-rebels who were now the Force Nouvelles, who were in the Hotel du Golfe, that is after the election and the following months? Answer, there were many soldiers in the Gulf Hotel. The soldiers of the Force Nouvelle, soldiers of the ONUSI, and from time to time French soldiers, but I do not have the precise figures. Question, did you have any information on the weapons there? For example, did they have any heavy weapons? Answer, yes, indeed. They had all sorts of weapons, handguns, pistols, A-52, automatic weapons, and rockets. Question, very well. Did you know who were the ex-rebel leaders? That is, the rebels who had become now the Force Nouvelles. That is, the leaders of those forces that were in the Gulf Hotel. Colonel Issa Ouattara, known as Ouattao, who was the deputy chief of staff of the Force Nouvelle, was there at the Gulf Hotel with other zone commanders. There was a name the witness mentioned. Question, which ones? Can you mention names? Answer, there was Watao, Sheriff Usman, Colonel Thiofosier, and so on and so forth.
D'accord.
Question, very well. Were there military, political, or diplomatic French authorities in the Gulf during that period? Answer, I knew with certainty that the ambassador of France to Côte d'Ivoire regularly went to the Gulf. Question, his name? Answer, I no longer remember, and yet we met several times. Question, if I put it to you, Jean-Marc Simon, will that jog your memory? Answer, yes, precisely, that is him. Question, did you have any information about what he was doing at the Gulf Hotel? What was his role? Answer, no, I do not know his role. I think that from the moment his country recognized President Alassane Ouattara as the elected official, as a diplomatic representative, he would go there to discuss relations between Côte d'Ivoire and France. That is what I think. Question, very well. And you do not have any information about the possible presence of French military advisors in the Gulf Hotel? Answer, French soldiers went there frequently, whether they were advisors or not, but I knew that French soldiers went there for military purposes, and that is my personal view. Question, very well. We will now move on to another point, and that is the rules of engagement. You have already given us some information during your questioning by the prosecutor, but can you tell us more specifically about the rules of engagement in the maintenance of law and order? And I will ask you another question later. What are the rules in the area of legitimate defense? But to begin with, I will simply want to ask you, what are the rules of engagement, so that we understand what the gendarmes can do and what they cannot do? And so, when it comes to preserving law and order, all the training that we received in Côte d'Ivoire and elsewhere is that demonstrators are not combatants. These are citizens that have temporarily lost their way, and so force cannot be used against these people unless in case of legitimate self-defense, and it should be proportionate to the attack. If somebody punches you, you can block it, the punch, but you cannot shoot at somebody because he threw a stone. Question, to your knowledge, were those rules respected by the units under your responsibility during the crisis? Answer, absolutely. Question, very well. You have just told us, but I want it to be clear. The case of legitimate self-defense, what can gendarmes do in such cases, in cases of legitimate self-defense?
There must be a law about that. it's not. I think it's not for a witness to say what can be done in the case of legitimate defense. There must be a law disciplining the legitimate defense. And if there is a law, the law is interpreted by the lawyers and not by the witnesses. It's not a fact.
There is, Your Honor, a law. It's been on the list of material of the defense for other witnesses. It's the defense document. It's a law of Côte d'Ivoire of Decree 1967 that is available as Rule 77. That is in e-court, but is not on the record. And we have no objections to. It's a legal document from the Côte d'Ivoire authorities. I think on legal documents, the chamber can take judicial notice of this. So we can provide the ERN number, but and we can send it so that it be submitted on the record as per your powers, Your Honor, to take notice of local judicial laws. It's a presidential decree of 1967 under Félix Houphouët-Boigny.
Thank you.
Monsieur le Président.
But I let the witness go beyond what a witness should do, to speak about facts, not about the law. The law is something which is there, it is submitted, it will be submitted, and we can evaluate it.
Alors, si je peux dire un mot là-dessus.
If I can say a word there, Mr. President, in France, and also it is true in Côte d'Ivoire, there are no laws as such for in this case. There are decrees, and a decree is not a law. Secondly, this is the testimony of the witness, and we wanted to know whether, to his knowledge, these rules, and it is not a law, these rules, were they implemented and implemented correctly, and how does it mean, what does it mean to implement them correctly? That is what we wanted to know from him. So it seems to me that the question could be asked.
One is the instructions was given to the gendarmes. Another thing is what is the legitimate defense and how it operates. I mean, that we should know, and that is probably in some law or decree, some legal instrument. One is the interpretation of that, and one is what has been done in the field.
Je crois que nous disons en fait la...
Mr. Altit, I think we are saying the same thing. These possible instructions to the gendarmes, in fact, it may be necessary to know whether they correspond to the legal or regulatory framework. And so we wanted to know from the commander of the gendarmerie what was this framework in practice, concretely, because you have theory and you have practice. And I think basically we are saying the same thing, Your Honor.
We'll see that if we're saying the same thing. We'll see as you continue questioning.
Mr. President, I'm sorry, may I, in support of Mr. Altit's point, say to the court that the rules of engagement are normally not embedded in the law.
But we are not talking about the rules of engagement. We are talking about the legitimate defense. What are the rules for legitimate defense? And not how things were implemented on the field. So if we talk of the rules of engagement, it's okay. Because that is something which is for the hierarchy to say, but not for the basis, which is the law. Maître Altit.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors,
Mr. Altit, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Witness, you have listened to the exchanges, so you know what is of interest to us. We want to know what happened exactly. And to do that, we should know the framework, the circumstances under which one can organize legitimate self-defense. There are instruments or documents which could be analyzed, but you, as the commander of the gendarmerie, can you tell us what were the conditions for self-defense and how was this implemented concretely? Answer: if there is aggression against an officer in charge of law and order, the officer has to react using methods that are proportionate to the attack. If it goes beyond that, it is vengeance, and he should be accountable. Question: tell me, if I understand you correctly, the key word is proportionality. Is that correct? Answer: absolutely. Question: and now, to your knowledge, the gendarmerie units under your authority who were answerable to you during the entire crisis, did they use legitimate self-defense in the manner stipulated as you have told us, that is, proportionately, or did they go beyond this framework on certain occasions? That is that framework that you have described here. Answer: let me recall that the gendarmerie acts mainly in rural areas when there are large crowds, and in towns it is usually the police. And to my knowledge, we have never used disproportionate means. So if there are stones and roadblocks, and which are frequently tires, we simply take them away.
D'accord, monsieur. Oui, oui, tout cela est très clair. Au moins parler.
Question: that is very clear. But you have talked of attacks against gendarmes with firearms, and there was loss of life. In this case, would the gendarmes defend themselves? What would they do? Answer: I was dealing with the case of Abobo Ga. Gendarmes had been posted all the time to monitor the antenna in Abobo Ga for sound and television. They were protecting that site, and that strategic site was attacked by the invisible commando. There were two gendarmes. They killed one. The other one fled. So in this case, there was no exchange of fire. They were in an inferior position. So talking about proportionality, one gendarme was killed, the other fled. So they progressed in Abidjan from Aboboga towards Ajame. There was a factory called Filthy Sack, and it was protected by gendarmes. It is our traditional mission to protect people and property. Those elements progressed, and once again they shot down the gendarmes who were there. So it was not a case of maintenance of law and order. So it was an aggression by the invisible commando against all the gendarmes that they came upon.
D'accord.
Question. Very well. That was very clear. We can phrase the question differently. To your knowledge, was there ever a case or incident which would have required an investigation because the criteria or proportionality of legitimate defense arose? And so your answer, Mr. President, if they can observe a pause, it's it.
Oui.
Alors, je vous repose la question.
Question. Let me ask the question again so that you can tell the chamber clearly. To your knowledge, was there ever a single incident, one or two? Can you tell the chamber, to your knowledge, what happened during the crisis? Answer. There was the incident that we have talked about here. That is the incident at Yupugon in the Wasakara sub-neighborhood between the gendarmes under the command of Captain Kukunyong with soldiers, and the incident led to loss of life amongst the people who were supposed to be rebels, and when it was cross-checked, these were RDR militants. The police in that area took over the case, opened an investigation, and I know nothing further. It is the commissioner of the government who is responsible for that proceeding that is dealt with by the police and not the gendarmerie. That is what I know. Any other thing I don't remember.
D'accord.
Question. Very well. Let us move on to something else. You told us of a certain number of appointments or meetings with between the president and the main leaders or commanders of the forces of law and order, during which you were present. And during these meetings, the leaders reported on the prevailing situation in Abidjan to the president. Is that correct? Answer. That is correct.
Which was not needed. One of the many questions which was not needed.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Altit, Mr. President, it is just an aside here, but I think it could be useful. If we are talking about the duration of the questioning by the non-calling party, I think we are spending less time questioning this witness than the prosecutor. But I think that we can conclude within a reasonable time frame. So from our point of view, the questions are relevant and do not hamper the compliance with the time that would have been allocated to the defense. I'm saying this just to reassure the chamber.
You put a question, which also if you don't put, you ask the witness if he agrees with what he said maybe 10 minutes ago. Of course he does. So that's not, it is correct. Just make the question.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Altid.
Comme la...
Mr. President, there has to be a certain logic. And the witness had not talked about this specific point today. I'm referring to what happened in the past days. And this happened over several statements, over several days.
And then I stop. In English, I say, you told us of a certain number of appointments of meetings between the president, the main leaders and commanders of the forces, etc. Is that correct? Of course it is. Just go to the question. Why this question, is it correct? But no. Come on. Please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. First question, Mr. Witness. Apparently, well, you have told us that these were not very long meetings. Am I mistaken? Answer: yes. Question: generally, how long? Answer: 10 to 15 minutes, no more. Question: no more than that? Answer: correct. Question: what happened so that we should try to see or visualize who would take the floor and who would say what? Answer: the army is a hierarchical body, and when we went to see the head of state, it was the chief of general staff who would take the floor and give a situation report, and in this particular case it was General Philippe Mangou.
C'était le seul à parler.
Question: was he the only one who spoke? Answer: he was the only one who spoke, unless the president asked questions and if there were things to be added.
Donc, compte tenu du...
Question: so, considering that the meetings were short, would it be correct to say that specific items were not dealt with and the participants discussed generalities? Answer: no, these were not generalities. You have seen the previous documents, order of operations, general situations, specific situations. So it was within this context that the Chief of Staff summarized the report to the President of the Republic. You can have seen the timetable. The President had other people to receive, so you could have 1 or 2 hours, and the head of state had to receive other people. Question: thank you.
Et vous nous avez...
You also told us what the head of state said, so I will not go back to that. My question is this. Regarding the head of state's response, was this a rigid process that was repeated on each of those meetings? Answer: yes.
D'accord.
Question: very well. Let us now talk about your visit to the presidential residence. If I understood what you said at the beginning of your testimony, you sometimes went to the residence at your own behest to see some friends. Is that the case? Answer: yes, that is correct. Question: could it be said that other Ivorian dignitaries also went to the residence to see friends? In other words, those who were at the residence were not always there because they had been summoned by the President of the Republic. Is that correct?
I don't want to go too far, but this calls for speculation about what other people are doing.
It is.
I will leave it at that.
It is what other people are doing, is not what he has done. The witness is the witness. Okay.
Alors, je vais reformuler.
I will rephrase. Did you meet anybody at the residence who did not work there, but who were there without having been invited by the head of state? Answer, Counsel, with your leave, I did not have the President's diary to know whether those who were there were invited or not. You know, in Abidjan, the President works at his residence and at the Presidency. Some take appointments at the residence, while others take appointments at the Presidential Palace. So it could happen that people for different purposes can meet in the living room. There are 4 entries to the palace. And when you get in, you have 3 living areas, 3 main rooms, and people can be sitting there waiting to be received one after the other for different purposes. Question, thank you.
Alors,
Question. You testified about your last visit to the residence. You mentioned an incident which happened during that visit. Do you remember that? Answer, yes. Question, where were you coming from when you went to the residence? Answer, I came from Gbagbo, where I had been living for 10 years, and I was going to the residence.
Monsieur le Président, j'attends que... je crois que le transcrit est arrêté, j'attends.
Maître Altid, Mr. President, I am waiting for the transcript to come up.
Je me tourne vers les interprètes, c'est bon? Ok.
Is it okay? Now, were there any French units, or did you come across any French units on your way to or from the residence? Answer, no. I rather met some soldiers at the RTI. They were at that level.
Soldiers or soldiers?
The witness, no, Ivorian soldiers who were guarding the RTI.
Alors, à la fin de la
Question. At the end of the crisis, did the French army attack gendarmerie bases in Abidjan? Answer. There were several attacks that took place, but with your leave, if the chamber does authorize me, I could say a little more. Maître Altid, the President allowing.
Of course, you may say.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Whatever.
The witness. Thank you, Mr. President. The armies that were pitted against each other, the FDS and FAFN, did not have an air force or aviation. Only ONUC and the French forces had aircrafts which attacked the Akodo camp. They attacked the Navy. There were 2 attacks on the Agban camp. The first attack led to the death of a young girl because the shell went through her father's living room and she was struck. The second attack targeted the armored vehicles of the gendarmerie. And then thereafter, there were daily overflights by a number of aircrafts over the Agban camp. Now, whether up there it was the Russians or the French, well, I don't know. There were several flights over the camp. And those are the attacks that took place.
What period are you talking about? When this happened, these attacks, air attacks?
Oui, c'est en gros au mois de...
Well, generally in the month of March, when a Security Council resolution ordered the destruction of the heavy weaponry of the President Laurent Gbagbo's army. That's in broad strokes, yes, after the crisis, during that period.
End of the crisis, like March, April.
Voilà, c'est cela.
Yes, that is correct. Yes, that is correct. March14th. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Kassarate, just to make things clear, you said a short while ago that aircrafts were overflying the camp. Did you mean helicopters? The witness. Yes, I'm sorry, I meant helicopters. Question. Very well.
Alors, à un moment, je crois que c'était hier, de manière
Question. I think yesterday, incidentally, you said that I saw that several generals were no longer in position or in their positions. What did you mean by that? What were you thinking about when you said that? Can you explain this to the court? Answer. I will be very specific. My gendarmes informed me that the Chief of General Staff, General Mangu, was neither in his office nor at his residence. Rumors had it that he was in the embassy of South Africa in Abidjan. That's one. Two, over television, which had been broadcasting from the Gulf Hotel, I saw pictures of General Tuvoli Bizogo, personal chief of General Staff of the President of the Republic, who called on the army to surrender their weapons. This was at the Gulf. And then shortly thereafter, on the same TV, I saw General Tete Loto, Chief of Operations in Abidjan, over this television that was broadcasting from the Gulf. I saw him inviting people to stop fighting. So those are the main generals whom I saw on TV calling on people to drop their weapons.
D'accord.
Question. Very well. As far as you know, did RHDP and Force Nouvelle or French representatives, did they establish any contacts with your subordinates in an effort to influence them during the crisis? Answer. None of my subordinates reported to me on any such conduct. None of them. Question. Did representatives of RHDP, the Force Nouvelle, representatives of the Gulf, to be precise, or French representatives, did any of them try to contact you and to influence you during the crisis? Answer. I did not have any contact with the French. However, I received 2 defense attaches in my office. They must have been Americans, I believe, who were asking whether the gendarmerie was going to join ranks or not. And my answer to them was, this is a political matter.
Est-ce que vous voulez...
Question. Very well. Mr. Witness, we're dealing here with very complicated matters, and maybe it might be difficult to remember some of these things. Do you want us to go into a private session to talk about these things much more peacefully? The witness, about this issue, question, yes, about what may have transpired between the generals and external intervenors. The witness, I am in the hands of the judge. I have no decision to make.
Is in your hands. I mean, if you feel comfortable, we just go ahead. If you don't feel comfortable for any reason, you tell me, and we go in private session.
Monsieur le Président.
Maître Altit, Mr. President, I'm going to ask a few questions in addition to this one, which may also be quite delicate. So I am requesting that we go into private session, and this would make the witness probably feel a lot more comfortable.
So let's go in private session, and then well, just tell me something.
Monsieur le Président.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Monsieur le Président.
Yes.
The witness. Mr. President, I have no problem dealing with these matters in open session.
Let's go ahead.
Oui, mais comme je vais poser d'autres...
Maître Altit, but I have other questions that will follow. But I understand that for this particular question, there might be no problem, but I have other questions which are different from this one, and for that reason, I'm applying for private session, Mr. President.
So you know that as from now, when the court officer is saying it, we are in private session.